Welcome back to Messengers, and it's a special one with the nutty professor, David Ash. And David, you and I go back a long way.
Indeed we do, Christian.
We really do.
Yeah.
I met you in 2008 when I was dating your nephew. Mm-hmm. And you two were organizing Heart Space, a little festival. That's where I met him as well. And we hit it off, didn't we, David? We just, actually, we're like two little children when we're together.
Absolutely, yeah. And the fun we had in New Zealand, do you remember? We went off on that epic voyage with Bruce, the three of us.
For 3 months we went off, just playing so music and woofing, as they call it in New Zealand, which means you basically slave labor for, really, isn't it? No, not really, no. It's actually quite nice. You can stay on farms and then help out in exchange for a bed and food. And we had a whale of a time. I interviewed you several times, and whenever we do that, it's always like, it's like this vortex opens.
That's right.
And that's exactly what we'll be talking about in this series, your vortex theory. And the reason why is because it's important that we know about this. It's important we understand the nature of reality with regards to science.
Yeah, that's correct.
So that people also understand, you know, what is possible with us. So we will be getting into that in the next 6 episodes. But before we do that, I would love to hear I know about your story, but you can maybe share with the viewers briefly why you're into this. Tell me a bit more about your background.
Well, I actually started this when I was 4. At the age 4, apparently my mother told me that I ran into my father's waiting room, and my father was a doctor, you see, and a patient, one of his patients, an elderly lady, said to me, "What are you going to do when you grow up?" And I just replied in sort of impudent cockiness, as it were, one would say precocious, that I'm going to prove the existence of God through science.
Wow.
So that is what the 6 episodes are about. But before we start, I need to make it very clear what I'm talking about when I use the word God. I'm not talking about the Hebrew God, the God of the Bible. I'm talking about a universal consciousness, which I call Einstein's God, which is more a consciousness that underlies everything. And you'll begin to see this through the vortex theory, how exactly what the nature of energy is and what the nature of this God is and how it relates to us personally. So, and it's very much at the core of our being, this universal God. It's the source of our own life force. So what I want to do before we start and at the beginning of every episode is to teach you all a way of connecting with your innermost core, your God center, if you like, the center of your reality. And I call it the open way. And so I'm doing this because it's going to help me to connect and stay centered.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And so by doing it at the beginning of every episode, you'll all get a chance just to practice this and get into the habit of it. You see, usually with meditations, you're told to sit down and meditate. And this is, people haven't got time to allocate an hour to sit down and meditate.
They're not making time, rather.
No, they're not making time. But with this form of meditation, with the open way, you meditate when you sit down. So in other words, whatever you're doing, you can be walking, you can be doing the hoovering, you could be looking at your screen, you can just be relaxing to music. And it's just a matter of remembering to practice the open way. So what I want you to do is to lift your tongues just up, they still face forwards, but just a couple of centimeters, like this. Okay? Lift your tongue up and taste around the edge of the tongue for the chi, for the life force. And as you do so, you'll find your breath going slow and deep. And just go into the breath and allow the breath to take you in to the source of your life consciousness, the source of chi or prana, below the breath. So we just do that for a few moments. So, Chrissy, it was my father that introduced me.
Is that all it is?
Yeah.
Is that simple?
It's that simple.
Okay. You just lift your tongue up, basically.
You just lift your tongue up and taste the tongue and feel into the chi. Imagine the chi, it's like the water of life, is a well at the bottom of your breath. So what you're doing is you're using the pump like the handle or the primer of the pump, and then you go down and you use the breath as like the pump that lifts the chi up. And then it's like a shower, it just fills your whole being. With each breath, you're lifting the chi, you're lifting the life force up.
Okay.
And just filling you up. And this is where the word fulfillment comes from, the word enjoyment, you see. And it's like the bliss in the breath.
Okay.
And as we move into increasingly challenging times, this is a way of staying centered. Or if you get anxious or worried, you can just go into the open way. And the important thing is to teach it to others, so it goes viral.
Okay. Thank you.
So it was my father that introduced me to the breath, my father that introduced me to the open way when I was a boy. But my father was a very remarkable man. He was a Harley Street physician. He was on the point of becoming appointed physician to King George VI, but there was a delay in the procedures of appointment, and the king died before the appointment was completed. But my pa had almost miraculous powers of healing, especially with cancer. And I think he could have really helped the king with lung cancer. And the Queen, Queen Elizabeth, may not have been on the throne for so long. He might have lived an extra 6 months, if you see what I mean. But as it was, my father was the first doctor to identify cigarette smoking with lung cancer in Britain in the 1950s. And also, he did a lot of research in Cornwall, where we were living at the time, and he realized that people living over uranium loads were more prone to get cancer. He saw these cancer clusters in Cornwall. And so this has led to the whole business of people's homes being surveyed for radon gas and ventilated underneath, because it's the radon coming up from the decay of the uranium collecting under the houses that causes the cancer.
Because they tell you about that now when you do a house survey, right. When you buy a house, it will tell you
to check the radon. Well, my father started all that. It was his original research, you see, that kicked that off. And in order to do the research, to prove his point, he had to collect, all he had was geological maps. And he saw the geology where these cancer clusters were. And so he went to these places to look for the geology, but he couldn't go into the village and dig up underneath the house. So he went on to Bodmin Moor, where there was this same geology, geological formations. It was granite, you see. When I was 7, my father took us all on one of these expeditions to find this type of uranium-bearing granite. And anyway, what he would do is, my brother Tim, who was older than me, he would hold a piece of uranium ore on the palm of his hand, and he would feel for the tingling with his fingertips. And we had this old Rolls Royce, a Silver Ghost, which my father, it had been a chicken coop. My father bought it for £10, and he nailed a sofa in the back, and he threw us all in. There were no
There were loads of siblings, weren't there?
Yeah.
How many siblings were there?
Well, at that time, there were about 6 of us. We had a cousin, Andrew, who joined us, but I was a family of 8. It was like, my father was like Snow White. Well, he was Snow Dark and the 7 Dwarfs, you see. Anyway, we went off with pickaxes and shovels in this old Rolls Royce. And so Tim was dowsing and feeling for where the energy was. And my father would follow Tim's tingling until Tim began to cry because the tingling had turned to a painful prickle. And this was out on Bodmin Moor. So my father rolled the roller off the road, and he got out the Geiger counter. So you can see where my father was mixing, the psychic with the scientific. In other words, how was he going to find uranium ore?
Was he dowsing as well?
Well, no, he was using fingers. He taught feeling with the fingers.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Tim began to cry because it was a prickle, he knew it was strong.
This child torture.
So that's right. He got out the Geiger counter, and the Geiger counter went berserk in the middle of the road. So when I was 7, I wasn't playing football and Lego and Meccano. I did have a Meccano set, but I was actually working with Geiger counters, Geiger-Müller counters. You know, I was being introduced to radioactivity physics. I mean, I was weaned on Lord Ernest Rutherford, and you see how I was being taught physics when I was 6 and 7.
Yeah.
So we got the Geiger counter going, and it was going berserk with this clicking over the centre of the road. And literally, we dug up the road with pickaxes and shovels. We attacked that road.
I love it.
And we've got this lump of granite out of the road. And there were these black streaks running through it, which my father said was 10% uranium oxide. So he got out the sledgehammer and he smashed up this piece of rock. And we were all there picking out these little black bits of 10% uranium oxide. This is radioactive stuff, you know. Anyway, we collected it up. And my father got us to wash our hands in the stream before we ate our lunch of a loaf of bread ripped apart with chocolate and withered apples. And we set off, leaving a crater in the road. Well, the roads weren't made up on the moor in those days. They were unmade up roads, you see.
Yeah.
Anyway, my father, he had dustbinfuls of these uranium samples, of these granite samples with uranium outside the back door. We had enough uranium outside the back door to make our own bomb almost. And he would pack this uranium-bearing rock into Hessian bags and put them on the train and send them up to Cambridge for analysis. And anyone who turned up, you know, they used to go into the guards compartment, and you'd have the deliveries, you see. So he put them in the guards department, and some chap with a bicycle would come in and sit down on these sacks, and of course he'd be getting radioactivity up his bum.
Oh my word! You know, in those days,
there was no health and
safety. I know, but basically, you were raised in a family exploring outside of the margins.
Absolutely.
And so, what happened?
Well, my father taught me to question everything. He taught me to, you know, a bit like Einstein, to be a rebel, to never trust the establishment, never trust what you're taught. You know.
Beautiful.
So when I was 16, I was reading a book on yogic philosophy, and I really understood Einstein, E equals MC squared. And I was reading this book on yogic philosophy, which you can still get. It's called An Advanced Course in Yogic Philosophy. And in it, I read all about the vortex theory, the vortex atom theory in 19th century physics. But then what it said is that the yogis, thousands of years ago, had penetrated the atom with their siddhi powers. It's called the anima siddhi. And they saw that inside the atom, there was nothing but spin. They saw that the smallest particles of matter were vortices of prana. And I was electrified by that, because they had said that the smallest particles of matter were whirlpools of prana, of energy, before Einstein. This book was published that I read in 1904. And it was in 1905 that Einstein actually published E equals MC squared, showing that mass is a form of energy.
Yeah.
You see? And also it's 1905 that Einstein published the paper actually proving the atomic theory, proving that that they are atoms. But the 19th century scientists were not to know that it was subatomic particles and not atoms, you see, because they thought the atom was the smallest particle of matter. And even in 1905, Einstein didn't know anything about subatomic particles. They knew about electrons, but it was another 4 years before Lord Rutherford actually discovered the neutron, and 1919 before he discovered the proton, which are the particles in the center of the atom. And it was Rutherford that established that the atom is a bit like the solar system, with electrons orbiting the protons. And this model of the atom has been developed, but nonetheless it shows the atom is mainly space, you see.
Because there's a reason why you were so fascinated with it. And this is, what we're going to explore in the next episode.
That's correct, yes.
Because, we don't just want to randomly talk about physics unless it has something that can assist us in the process of self-realization, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. You see, what it was is that I realized that physics had made a great mistake by abandoning the vortex theory, the vortex atom theory, because what happened is that the vortex atom theory couldn't explain the new discoveries about the atom. And I realized it wasn't the fault of the vortex theory, it was because they applied it to the wrong level. So I've devoted 50 years, most of my life, to applying the vortex theory to subatomic particles, to electrons and protons. And I found it incredibly successful. You see, so it makes science understandable. The important thing about the vortex theory is not whether it's true or not. It's difficult to prove what's absolutely true. It's how useful it is.
Yes.
And one of the things that we need is a way to understand physics. In the 19th century, it was really understandable. People were really excited about science and about physics.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Now it's becoming incomprehensible. So I'm trying to present a model, a picture of the universe that we can all understand.
Yeah, and to show that everything's energy and that matter is not what they say matter is.
Absolutely.
And that's it matters that we talk about this.
It really matters that we talk about matter.
So we'll go into that in the next episode.
We're going to go into this in the next episode and get into the nitty-gritty of it.
See you in episode 2.
That's lovely. So thank you very much indeed.